Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea starts administering the coronavirus vaccine from AstraZeneca to people 65 and older, having deemed it safe. President Moon Jae-in gets his first dose, which he'll need to go to the G7 summit in the UK in June. Fewer than 400 new cases of COVID-19 reported in South Korea today for the first time in about a week. A few dozen cases, though, of the new variants. And the past year's incredible recovery in the stock market has drawn in millions of new investors in South Korea. There is now almost one stock brokerage account for every adult in the country. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea on Tuesday started giving doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine to people 65 and older. First up are staff and patients at care hospitals, then nursing homes. A survey shows people are more reluctant to get it than they were a month ago, despite experts saying that the benefits outweigh the risks. Kim Hyun-sung reports.
From Tuesday, South Korea started rolling out the AstraZeneca vaccine to those aged 65 and older. In care hospitals nationwide, teams of medical experts are administering the vaccines. This care hospital in Gyeonggi-do province will inoculate almost 300 people this week. Vaccine supplies are boosted by a fresh batch of AstraZeneca doses coming in on Tuesday afternoon. In the following week, inoculations for over 65s will also begin at nursing homes. But safety concerns mean the uptake of the vaccine has been falling.
Many of the patients' guardians called our safety department to ask if the vaccines were safe after hearing about recent issues of blood clots or other symptoms.
In this care hospital, less than 30% of the eligible patients have agreed to get vaccinated, which is quite a notable dip from the percentage shown last month, when almost 60% of the patients signed up for the inoculations. The dip is also being seen on a nationwide scale, where only around 77% of eligible people have agreed to the jab, compared to 94% back in February. There were 101 reports on Tuesday of side effects from the vaccines. Most were mild symptoms such as fever or nausea, with one case of muscle convulsion and an adverse reaction in the nervous system. Those getting the jab themselves were more positive about the vaccine.
I have waited a long time to get the vaccine for the safety of myself, for those around me, and for everybody.
Some people say that they don't want to get inoculated or they want to get inoculated later, but I still think that vaccinations are necessary. I fully trust vaccines.
South Korea has administered the first dose to more than 685,000 people, which is 85% of those currently eligible for the vaccine, 25 days since vaccinations began. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
And South Korean President Moon Jae-in, aged 68, also got his first vaccine dose today, and so did the First Lady. They'll need it for a trip to the UK this summer, where they'll attend the G7 summit. It's also hoped that this will help put to rest concerns about the vaccine among the public. Kim Min-ji reports.
President Moon Jae-in got his first dose of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine on Tuesday. Like others, the president filled out a questionnaire in advance and received a preliminary checkup on his health to make sure he was fit for the vaccine. President Moon's vaccination comes in accordance with the KDCA manual for essential foreign travel, as he has been invited to attend the in-person G7 meeting in the UK in June. The AstraZeneca vaccine requires 2 doses within a time frame of 8 to 12 weeks, and it takes a few more weeks after that to fully build immunity. The top office said the Moon's inoculation is also aimed at easing concerns over the safety and efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine, especially as it comes on the first day the country started administering the vaccine to over 65s. Moon is 68 years old. 10 others, including First Lady Kim Jong-suk and National Security Advisor Se-hoon, who will accompany the president on his trip, got their first shots from the same vial as the president.
The top office says President Moon is feeling fine after a shot and that he is carrying out his work as scheduled. His second dose is expected in May. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea today reported fewer than 400 new cases of COVID-19 for the first time in about a week. Some of the new cases are part of a cluster of the UK variant found in the southeast of the country. Jong-un reports.
South Korea reported 346 new COVID-19 cases on Tuesday, falling below the 400 mark for the first time in over a week. Of them, 331 were transmitted domestically, 15 from overseas. With 7 more deaths, South Korea's COVID death toll is now more than 1,700. Cluster infections are popping up mainly in the central region, accounting for almost 70% of Tuesday's total. Seoul and its surrounding Gyeonggi province saw 97 and 120 new cases respectively. Most of them are linked to offices, work sites, churches, and gatherings. Recent cluster infections were reported at Seoul's Nowon-gu district office with at least 12 confirmed patients, and from a kindergarten in Gangwon-do province with at least 29 people infected. Variant strains continue to emerge as well. 25 cases linked to the UK variant have been discovered, concentrated in the Yeongnam region, from a funeral in Busan and a Gulf screening center as well as family gatherings in Ulsan. One case of the South African variant has also been confirmed, and health authorities are investigating whether it has impacted other domestic clusters. With 75 cases of variants coming from the US, there are so far 324 confirmed variant cases in total. As the weather warms up in South Korea, health authorities are urging the public to avoid gatherings and trips whenever possible. 최정윤, Arirang News.
The extraordinary rise in stock markets since the crash a year ago, combined with low interest rates, has drawn in huge numbers of new investors. And as of last Friday, the number of active stock brokerage accounts in South Korea had risen to more than 40 million for the first time. That's according to the Korea Financial Investment Association, which put the figure at 40,070,000. In fact, that's almost equal to the number of adults in the entire country, which is around 43 million. And it's an increase of 10 million from last March and more than 5 million just this year. The Federal Reserve has decided to let a key measure it took last year to support the economy expire at the end of this month. This is the Supplementary Leverage Ratio, letting banks keep a smaller amount of reserves against the money they lend out so that Americans and households and businesses would be able to borrow. Our business correspondent Se-hoon has this report.
The Federal Reserve loosened the Supplementary Leverage Ratio, or also known as SLR, in May last year, but last Friday decided to let the temporary change expire as scheduled on March 31st. The change was aimed at providing flexibility to banks so that they could provide credit to households and businesses during the pandemic era. SLR is defined as capital over total leverage exposure, with leverage including stocks, derivatives, treasuries, and bank reserves. The temporary change also allowed banks to exclude U.S. treasuries and central bank reserves when it came to calculating their leverage ratio. The banking industry was longing for the exemption to be extended because the treasury bond yields could increase further if banks sell their treasury holdings to meet the required SLR ratio. However, the financial authorities took the opposite position. The Fed said since the largest banks have about $1 trillion in capital, ending the temporary relief would only slightly shift ratio levels. The central bank also noted it will look for public comment on ways to adjust the supplementary leverage ratio. Following the Fed announcement, bank stocks fell. Wells Fargo dropped near 3%, while both JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs saw their shares sliding more than 1%. The 10-year U.S. Treasury yield on Friday was sent to as high as 1.749%, hovering around its 14-month high. But the figure settled down to 1.732%, with little change from Thursday's close.
Overall, it is inevitable to see Treasury bond yields continuing to rise, as well as inflation. Treasury and stock markets would be heavily affected by the Fed's gradual reversal of a quantitative easing policy.
The expert added that when interest rates go up, some emerging markets will see cash outflow to the U.S., but at the same time, some of the U.S. key trading partners would benefit from it. Se-hoon, Arirang News.
Wearing face masks in the pandemic has obviously resulted in a lot of extra trash to throw away. That's got people worried. So a team of Korean researchers have come up with a mask material that is 100% biodegradable. If it's buried in the ground, it'll be gone in 4 weeks. Jin has this story.
This is Yeouido Hangang Park in Seoul. You can easily see masks thrown out on the grass.
I use 5 to 6 face masks every week, so it's definitely increased trash.
Face masks are becoming an essential item, but it's made me worry about how to dispose of them.
In South Korea, 20 million masks are used every day, adding up to a total of 7.3 billion per year. The most essential part of the mask, the filter, is made of plastic. And because of contamination, it cannot be recycled. It needs to be burned or buried, making environmental pollution unavoidable. A domestic research team set out to find an alternative solution. They made mask filters out of biodegradable plastic. It decomposes in 6 hours with the use of a particular enzyme and in 4 weeks in the soil.
We put the mask filter in natural fertilizer and microorganisms decomposed it in 28 days.
Compared to existing masks, the filter holes have been made bigger, making breathing more comfortable. The filter is coated with chitosan, a natural material that is positively charged, which attracts negatively charged viruses, keeping the filter efficient.
Because existing masks use static electricity to attract fine dust or viruses, they lose their function when exposed to moisture. The masks we have developed overcome that drawback.
Chitosan filters don't lose their efficiency after being washed, which makes the face mask reusable. Beyond the face mask filters, the research team will further explore ways to make the elastic straps and aluminum nose wire biodegradable. Jin, Arirang News.
It's one of Korea's most anticipated events of the year, Seoul Fashion Week, and today is the first full day of shows. Last year this time, as the pandemic began, the fashion shows were completely canceled. Then last fall, it was all held online. For this edition, the designs on show were filmed at museums and landmarks throughout the capital and can be seen on YouTube. Baeun-ji reports.
Models walk alongside a 1,000-year-old treasure. This year's Fall and Winter Seoul Fashion Week took the catwalk to somewhere completely new.
This year, instead of being held at its usual venue, the country's largest fashion week has been pre-recorded at museums and landmarks around Seoul, including where I'm standing right now at the National Museum of Korea.
This is the first time that the state-run museum has opened its doors to provide runways for models. A designer of one of the brands participating in the Fashion Week says she was even able to shoot the video with live performed Korean traditional music and traditional dance.
It was such an honor to showcase my collection at a place where so many national treasures are kept, especially for a designer like myself who focuses on such traditional Korean designs.
The shows were also filmed at the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art and at parks near the Han River. And promotional videos featuring South Korean actress Bae-duna will even appear at Times Square in New York. A digital trade show that allows overseas buyers to purchase the pieces through an online retail platform will run for 6 days from March 24th. For other retailers, over 60 brands will take part in a show on the country's largest live commerce platform, Naver Shopping Live.
With the prolonged COVID-19 pandemic, more people are refraining from outdoor activities, leading to a sales drop in the fashion industry. We hope to promote sales through the live commerce show, especially by having a lot of emerging designers participate in this event.
The Fashion Week will run until Saturday, and the shows will be uploaded on Seoul Fashion Week's YouTube channel. Baeun-ji, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time today.
Good afternoon.
Well, Fed Chair Jerome Powell talked about Bitcoin in a webinar on Monday, and he said, as many others do, that Bitcoin has a lot of flaws as a currency, as a store of value, not least because of its volatility, and it doesn't sound like he's convinced there needs to be a digital currency, either from the Fed or elsewhere. Tell us about Jerome Powell's remarks here.
Yes, if you look at what Powell said on Monday, is that cryptocurrency like Bitcoin are too volatile to replace dollars. Obviously, we're not looking at Bitcoin as a replacement to a dollar, but it is specifically a bit more of nature of like a digital gold. Obviously, gold does not replace the cryptocurrencies. The gold does not replace the U.S. dollars, but it is an alternative investment. So obviously, the cryptocurrency, which is called as a crypto dollars or crypto gold. So this actually is a specific alternative asset. But in any case, the Chairman Powell is keep talking about how the cryptocurrency has a aspect of irregularities and illegalities, and that it can create some of the problems in terms of the money transfer. So yes, I think that this is an issue, and the regulatory framework will be coming quite heavily on the cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. But if you look at a lot of the companies who are using these cryptocurrencies, the Bitcoin, as a settlement, such as Tesla or MicroStrategy and Square, obviously they are using this as a certain entities for settlement for the transactions. So if that's the case, the need for the Bitcoin will continue to remain somewhat. The question mark is, though, how large the size of this Bitcoin market will become. Right now is about $1 trillion size, and that is quite small relative to the existing money transactions that you are seeing in global scale. So therefore, this can be a substitute for gold somewhat. But once again, it's not going to be a substitute for U.S. dollars. And clearly, we will look at that as a bit of another alternative assets rather than a replacement.
Right, and turning to the stock markets on Wall Street, stocks were up on Monday, especially the NASDAQ, which had a rough time last week. Helping was a decline again in Treasury yields. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, as you said, U.S. market did rebound quite nicely, particularly for the NASDAQ, which was up about 1.23%. S&P 500 was up about 0.7%. However, the small cap Russell 2000 was down by almost 1%. And today, seems that the market continues to show somewhat of correction for the small cap, and also even for the large caps and the tech sectors. They're all showing some corrections of somewhere between 0.3 to 0.4%. Despite that, the 10-year Treasury yield has come down from 1.7% plus to now about 1.65%. Everyone were keenly looking at what's happening to the 10-year Treasury yield. And as long as the Treasury yield stabilizes, then the perspective for the growth stock, particularly the NASDAQ, will remain to be quite positive. Looking at the fundamentals and the valuations, we are quite optimistic about these NASDAQ and growth stocks because we are expecting huge earnings growth. I think that right now, some of these corrections that you are seeing in the market is that how significantly the economy will recover. Most of the people were saying that U.S. economy will recover to 6.5%. This is the Fed's expectation. Some of the investment bankers are saying anywhere between 7 to 9%. We think that these numbers are quite too aggressive. And that's why I think that the small caps are correcting and the overall market's correcting despite the 10-year Treasury yields coming down, which is positive for the equity market. So people are having some doubts how much recovery, how sustainable recovery with all these kind of boosting measures that you are seeing in the monetary and fiscal policies. We think that right now is a time to look at specific sectors and specific companies who are continue to show strong growth in earnings and sales in the future.
Sounds like some of that sentiment carried over into Korean stocks today, which started out higher, but looks like institutions and foreigners were maybe taking some profits. Individuals continuing to buy, though. Both main indices down for the day. Tell us about the local markets.
Right. If you look at the Kospi, it was down about 1%, and the Kosdaq was down about 0.95, so about 1%. I think that it's because what happened to Turkey, the emerging market. Actually, Turkey is much weaker in terms of the balance sheets and the external debt. And with interest rate hiking by 2% almost, they're indicating that they're in a very bad situation for the liquidity condition in terms of external debt. As we've seen U.S. dollar strengthen quite nicely in the past several weeks, that has resulted into emerging market currency depreciating, including Korean won. So yes, I think the Turkey had some effect, which right now the Turkey's market's down by almost 7%, 8% right now, whereas the Kospi is down by only about 1%. But once again, because Korea is considered as the one of the emerging market, and the currency is depreciating somewhat, that has resulted into a continued net selling by the foreign investors. Today, we saw almost 500 billion won worth of foreign investors net selling. Only the retail investors were buyer of about 1 trillion won, and that is supporting the market for the time being. Once again, though, Korea is quite strong in terms of the fundamentals, including the export numbers. And all in all, we think that this is a short-term technical correction rather than a fundamental basis for the corrections.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much, as always, for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.
Ahead of the by-election next month for Seoul mayor, the right-leaning opposition bloc has chosen a unified candidate to represent them in former Mayor Se-hoon with the People Power Party. Based on an opinion poll of 3,200 Seoul voters by mobile phone a day earlier, the results were announced on Tuesday, with Oh beating out his rival with the opposition People's Party, An Chol-soo, who is the well-known software entrepreneur turned politician. Details of the poll were not released in accordance with election law, but party officials say Oh won by a wide margin. The two had agreed to merge their campaigns to raise their chances of beating the candidate of the ruling Democratic Party, Park Young-sun. The election is on Wednesday, April 7th. And early voting will be held for the Seoul mayoral election next Friday and Saturday, April 2nd and 3rd. If you're eligible as a Seoul resident, you can cast a ballot at one of the 424 polling stations throughout the country. On Election Day, however, you can only vote at your designated site. There are options for voters in quarantine, too. Those quarantined at home can vote by mail, or if asymptomatic, go to a polling station in their own car or on foot, as long as they're back home within 30 minutes. If in a quarantine facility, there will be voting booths set up. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time. News.